All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Become the Best You in 2022 virtual summit. I'm your host, Melissa Shuton, and I'm super excited to be here today with one of my longtime greatest friends, Taina Rodriguez-Berardi. Hi, Taina. Welcome.
Hi, Melissa. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm thrilled that you're here. So let me just take a minute to read through your bio and formally introduce you. Taina Rodriguez-Berardi is a scholar practitioner of yoga's history, philosophy, traditions, and Sanskrit texts. She has an MA in yoga studies from Loyola Marymount University, and her research focuses on the culture and customs of modern transnational yoga at their intersection with social justice movements and activist communities. As a yoga educator, Taina teaches workshops and facilitates yoga teacher trainings that integrate embodiment practices, movement therapeutics, modern health science, and trauma-informed wellness to create equitable and accessible yoga classes for people of all ages, sizes, shapes, abilities, and backgrounds. Taina truly believes that yoga can be beneficial for everyone and endeavors to create a holistic experience that engages the entire mind, body, spirit complex for all of her students. Taina lives with her husband and their two cats, Milo and Eva, in Long Beach, California, where they enjoy the beaches, backcountry nature spaces, riding bikes, and traveling the world. So fun and impressive. Hi, Ty.
Hi.
All right. So let's just get straight into the questions and learn more about you. So, I gave that little your bio, but what's your story? How did you get here to living your life as you are now?
Well, thank you for asking. And again, thank you for having. I think this is, with the post-pandemic and the world where we're at, I think it's really great to have the opportunity to continue to connect with people online and virtually. And I think these summits are really such a valuable way to continue to interact and especially, the pandemic goes on. So, but to your question, let's see. So, I grew up in the Bay Area and moved to San Diego for college and wanted to be in business. I don't know. I think one of those career days in high school, like somebody was working in like advertising and graphic design and doing really cool things. And that just spoke to my creative mind and also just wanting to live in San Diego. So went to San Diego State and did that and got a job, really an amazing job while I was still in school, working for Sony in the video game industry. And that turned into like a 15-year long career in the electronic gaming and virtual gaming industry. I traveled a lot. I worked a ton. I learned so much, and I really worked my way up through the company to be, one day I looked around and I was like, oh wait, I'm in charge. And it's just one of those things where the more I was like living the dream of, the American dream or whatever, the more I realized that I still wasn't like completely satisfied. And maybe that coincides with at the same time, and we'd been practicing, myself, you, and our other friends had been practicing yoga for quite a long time, and I even remember being really stressed in college and, a friend or an ex-boyfriend or somebody gave me a book on yoga and meditation, and I did some practices then, and we would go to classes just to like almost like hang out, but also you feel that residual bliss after class, or you listen to the words of the teacher and it starts to move beyond just the muscles and the mass of your body, but into your heart and your spirit. And so this whole time I'm working and traveling in corporate and also practicing yoga. Yoga is becoming a larger and larger part of my physical and spiritual life. And I decided to go back to school and get my MBA. And when I graduated from that program, I gifted myself a yoga teacher training just to kind of counteract all of the finance and law and entrepreneurship courses that I'd been taking, with something that was more for my heart, for me, for my body. And I didn't necessarily go into it thinking that I would be a yoga teacher, so to speak, maybe long term. I pictured myself with like gray hair and like teaching yoga or something.
Your retirement.
But yeah, that was my retirement plan for sure. Yeah. And I realized it was great, not to sound like, oh, like, everybody says, oh, it changed my life and blah, blah, blah. But it did, in that I learned a new skill set. I realized that it was something that I actually wanted to learn more about. That's something my a constant in my life is going back to school, because I think it's education is super powerful, and knowledge is super powerful, and discernment. And these are key tenets of yoga, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so, I was still working my not midnight to midnight corporate job. No, it wasn't that bad. But when you travel a lot and you're in charge of so many moving pieces and departments and people, you end up working a lot. And at a certain point, I kind of looked around and I was like, I have somebody else's dream job. This is not my dream job, it's someone else's. And I'm actually like taking up space for someone else who is meant to be here. And my career path in this, and my learning path in this space has, the time has been fulfilled. Because I wouldn't give that situation or that experience in corporate, in entertainment, in gaming up, because I learned so much about life and people, and and what I wanted really for my personal career. So it was a great opportunity for me to really reevaluate what I wanted in my life and the direction that I wanted to take my career, and the time that I spend just doing and being on this manifest like plane.
Yeah.
And so I decided I wanted to quit, and came up with a plan for that. It wasn't just like one day, and really just made it happen, because that was what I needed to do. And I took some months, maybe even some, a good space of time after leaving that job. And they even asked me to come back and consult, which was great, you know, to really evaluate. And I started, working at a studio, and I'd been teaching asana physical classes this whole time, and even years before, since I had started kind of the teacher, educator, trainer, teacher journey. Um, and so I took on more classes, and I managed an independent studio with the owner, and learned a lot more about like the wellness industry. And, all along had just more and more questions, right? So now that I had more free time to contemplate my personal yoga practice, or sadhana, or just my engagement with yoga, I had a lot more questions that weren't necessarily covered in a yoga class that's 60 or even 90 minutes, or by a typical Western modern yoga teacher. And, I wanted to do more, and found a yoga therapy course at Loyola Marymount University. And it was really that pivot point of figuring out that I wanted to go deeper into the realm of yoga, and starting that yoga therapy course, which then, led me to recognize that there was a master's of yoga studies at Loyola Marymount, like a graduate program, a 2-year program. And I was able to take a kind of like extensions course with the director of the program, and a lot of what he was saying was speaking to the questions that I had. And even if it was just the tip of the iceberg, it my questions are about the philosophy and the spirituality and the origins and the history of yoga, and like how we as practitioners in this modern world in 2021, 2022 and beyond are we actually practicing yoga as it was envisioned? Is this an entirely new practice? What is asana? What is meditation? What is spirituality and what is religion?
Mhm.
And how do they all kind of intersect under this 4-letter word yoga, right? And that to me was something that I wasn't getting in my day-to-day practice, and even reading texts and not really having guidance, right? A teacher. So after some exploration and thinking and talking with my husband, who was actually working in Orange County at the time, I applied to the program. I was accepted, and we made a big life move out of San Diego. I lived in San Diego for almost 20 years, and I started attending a second master's program, and this one was less about like achievement or, I think when you get an MBA, you definitely learn a lot. And I know you've gone through those programs as well. And I feel like it was almost like the flip side of the coin, right? You're like stimulating a different part of your brain and your heart. But a lot of the teachings are very much parallel, which is a whole other topic of conversation we can go into. So yeah, I went through the 2-year program. I just finished this year. My focus, my research, my thesis project were all really related to the concept of understanding the history and origins of yoga, and how that intersects with the modern practice, the modern community, and social justice movements. And I started the program back in 2019. This was prior to COVID. This was prior to, our collective social awakening and the murder of George Floyd and many other of our, Black brothers and sisters and BIPOC brothers and sisters during that time, that really pivotal time period where I think the nation was locked down and they were focused on, that watching the news or listening to the radio or, any and social media and anything that connected them to the outside world. So I think we were in this heightened state and therefore primed maybe for this awakening. And luckily, or just, uh, a stroke of just right place, right time. My studies were really aligned with what was going on, both in the bigger picture world, but also the yoga world. And so I came out of this program with so many more questions. And therefore, I know that it was probably the right place to be at that time. It gave me a lot to do during the pandemic. I was still 100% busy in writing and researching. So it actually worked out in that I didn't have FOMO because everybody was in the same place as me
Yeah.
on the internet, on their computers. And that's really what brings me to where I'm at today. Taking what I've learned over the course, whether that's in the actual classroom with students or studying, the Yoga Sutras, Bhagavad Gita, like reading different Sanskrit texts and different transliterations and translations. We learned Sanskrit at a very elementary level, even though we took 2 years of coursework. And I'm now applying that and trying to really create education workshops, trainings for teachers who have not been exposed to this type of content. I think, 200 hours for an initial training is really just the tip of the iceberg, as you know, and many people just don't even understand where yoga comes from, how it got to be where it's at, and how we can utilize it as a practice for not just individual liberation, but collective social change. So that's where I'm at today, living my life.
What an awesome story. I like what you said about like back in your Sony days when you had that realization that you were preventing somebody else from having their dream job. I think that is so powerful that you recognized it in that way, because so often people, I mean, I've been there too, we get quote unquote stuck in a job because it's easy, we're used to it, it's good, we're comfortable, but we're not necessarily happy. And if you can think about like how you did, you thought about somebody else that you don't even know. You weren't even focused on yourself in that moment, right? But then once you made that decision and opened up that space for somebody else, you created space for yourself and started coming up with these questions, right? Because you had time to think and to look into things. And I just think that's very inspirational for people who maybe want to make a change but are a little bit scared to get out of their comfort zone, right?
Yeah, it was really scary. It was like leaving such security. I had amazing insurance. I had an amazing paycheck that was stable and steady, and bonuses and perks and travel and like all of these things that, I thought would be what I dreamed of. And once I got there, I realized that that was not as fulfilling as
Mhm.
I thought it would be. Um, and also, I think it was the time in my life and also the subject matter that I was working with. At a certain point, I kind of looked around, and I think video games are really important. They've brought a lot of positive to the environment, but I also think that they can be something that's a detriment to our society, especially I read a statistic at some point in that pivotal time period, and it was like, a majority of college or men who don't attend college, a huge portion, I can't remember the exact numbers, so I'm botching that, but it was like a lot of them play 40 hours a week of video games. And to me, I was like, that's a full-time job. And also, if you're in that place, you haven't gone to college in our society today. I mean, unless you have a trade or some other backup plan, college is at least going to be a pinky toe in the door, right?
Yeah.
um so to me, I was like, am I contributing to this generation of young males who are exhibiting toxic masculinity traits, are having higher incidences of mental health and breaks and or suicide,
Mhm.
um, are not being equal partners to the women and or other people who are in their lives. So it was kind of like, I mean, I took it to that level, like in terms of like, what am I doing? And, I think the video game industry does wonderful things. There are educational tools, there are advances in technology, people that could not travel, whether physically or have disabilities, both visible and invisible, use video games to connect and live more engaging lives with the outside world. So there's so many positive things, but I was just ready. It was one of those, just, it was no longer compatible with my life.
Right. Right. And what you're like, so now in your new work, working with yoga and the trauma informed and social change and all of that, like, I think it's really special that you found like real depth in this industry that, and I mean, I'm guilty of it, but I'm going to say in this industry of high price yoga classes, $100 yoga pants, like all of this, right? Like yoga has turned into like this kind of picture perfect, expensive hobby, right? But there's so much depth and there's so much importance with what we do as yoga teachers, as yoga therapists. And so I would love to hear more about, with all that you've learned, with all the research that you've done, how are you using that when working with clients?
I think that is an important thing for all practitioners and teachers and people that are tangential to the yoga industry and the wellness industry. Because as it is now, our modern practices are very inaccessible to most people. There is research that says that at this point, the average practitioner of yoga is wealthy, educated, thin, and white, and of a higher socioeconomic standing. And I do this kind of practice at the beginning of many of my lectures. It's like, okay, close your eyes. And when you think and hear the word yoga, what do you picture? And even myself, a Mexican American, brown, fuller bodied, woman from urban, I grew up in Oakland and in an urban setting. And I still picture a really this woman in scorpion pose wearing Lululemon and blonde and thin and super flexible.
Yeah.
And, after all this time, and most people do too, they picture a quintessential studio class with, supple bodies on rubber yoga mats wearing yoga clothes.
Right.
And that in and of itself, the inability for us to imagine diversity within the classroom, and then let alone see diversity in the classroom, creates this inaccessibility that if we as proponents of yoga's healing and universal qualities are touting yoga's benefits to other people that look like us, or maybe that they have disabilities or experience, other marginalities within their lives, they hear yoga or see a yoga studio and are like, that's not for me, even though the benefits could be so amazing, right, for them to experience. So a lot of my research and time has been focused on understanding what are those barriers to entry that prohibit or inhibit people from wanting to or seeing themselves in the yoga or sacred space. And because this goes for wellness in a larger sense as well, whether it's Reiki or ecstatic dance or meditation circle or any of the things that are used in the or touted in wellness spaces. They are oftentimes kept from people of color, kept from people with lower incomes, kept from people that just look different than the average practitioner. And it could be it's systemic. It's part of an overarching system of oppression that keeps people from keeps marginalized people from proximities of power and from opportunities and from experiencing a full spectrum of what the benefits of society have to offer. And so I'm just looking at one particular lens, one particular technology, which is yoga, because I feel like it has so much to offer.
It does. Yeah, there's so many facets and tools and techniques within that 4-letter word. So as you've been leading trainings, teacher trainings, talking about this information and teaching other teachers, do you have any one favorite client story, maybe seeing a student have a big aha or a very important share related to this that just really made you feel so proud and certain that you're on the right path, that you are bringing this wonderful information to all of us?
Yeah, and I think I've had a lot of really cool experiences with people as a yoga teacher trainer. For example, when teaching about the history and origins of yoga, That's like a, one of my workshops or trainings or modules. And then a separate one, thinking about yoga and social change. And this is the first time that a lot of people have thought about yoga in this capacity. Um, you know, I think myself included got into yoga because it made me sweat. It made me feel good physically. I was cleansed. I would go after work and leave my yoga class and be like, what was I stressed about? Like, I can't even remember, and so you go into it for the physical aspects, and if you're lucky, it draws you in and you start experiencing the mental and other benefits beyond. And I've had the opportunity of teaching in different 200-hour and 300-hour trainings, and there are a lot of aha moments that people have, and you can just see it visibly on their face. And I think it starts with kind of dispelling a lot of the yoga myths. There's a lot of like, oh, yoga is 5,000 years old, or yoga is an unbroken lineage that's ancient, and it's like, those are like half truths. And I think a lot of yoga teachers spew words out because they've heard their teachers, whoever, say it. And my number one thing is like, be discerning, understand where your sources or who your sources are and why you are saying something. And a lot of people, I'll ask, like, how many of you have heard and or said like yoga is a 5,000-year-old unbroken lineage? And like a lot of hands go up, and it's like, okay, let's like break this down and talk about what yoga's origins truly are. And they're not just one lineage. It's so multifaceted. Yoga doesn't necessarily just come from India. It comes from the South Asian subcontinent, which at the time of its nascent or proto-yoga origins was not just India. It was Afghanistan. It was, all of these and even before Afghanistan, there was no lines in the sand. There are so many versions of yoga that meld and intersect. And I think about it like a river having so many tributaries and streams and, random little brooks that come in to create this one full water body. And if you drink, at one point in the river, it might taste or look different than if you drink or look at another part of the river. And so, I think the feedback that I've received is like, and this is could be from teachers, like say in a 300-hour who have been teaching for 10 years. And they're like, I have never heard these truths or these, I have never looked at yoga from this lens before. Right.
Mhm.
And I think it's important that as teachers, we are consummate students and are always questioning our sources. And that was one of the things that really spoke to me during the LMU master's program, was depending on who you read, who's translating the text is the answer you will receive. So if you are reading a version of the Yoga Sutras from a philologist, like somebody who studies language and translation, you will get a different outcome than if you look at a Yoga Sutras version from a guru or a swami.
Mhm.
And I think many people are like, oh, I've got the one copy of the Yoga Sutras, and don't recognize that, with a different lens, the translation or the terse the sutras turn or can be turned into something entirely different. So, a lot of aha moments, I think, of people not thinking about yoga as a very individual self-care, self-study practice versus thinking about it as a broader, more contextual tradition or
Yeah.
traditions.
Yeah. And, just talking on the sutras, the Yoga Sutras, most, if not almost all of the translations that are out there have been done by males. Like there's very few that have been interpreted and translated by a female. And so that's just what comes up. But like just what you're saying is like, depending on whose version that you pick up, you're missing out on a bunch of other ideas and interpretations of that. I know that as I've been going through my 300-hour and yoga therapy training, there's so much that has like blown up what I learned in my 200-hour, or just completely, you know, and I didn't question it in my 200 hours. Like, oh, these are what the teachers are saying, so this is what it is. And now it's like, no, you know, like there's not just one right necessarily. And what you're saying about the rivers, I forget exactly where I was in Germany, but there was a place where we were up on this high point and saw 3 different rivers coming together. All 3 of them were a slightly different color. And then once they came together, they made a 4th color. And I just hear like, that's what you're saying is like, learn this, learn that, and then like put it together. There's still so much to learn. As you said, you're done with your program and you still have questions, more questions.
Totally.
Yeah. So, okay, so the tagline of this summit is discover simple self-care and healing tools to create your best life with ease. And my intention for this summit is to help people improve their well-being, increase self-love, and stay focused on their goals. So do you have any tools or practices that you can share with us from the accessibility standpoint, from making yoga accessible for somebody who is like, oh, I don't do yoga because I'm not flexible, or I don't do yoga because I can't afford it, or, you know, all these different things that keep people from actually trying it. What could you share with us today?
I think that's a great question from an accessibility standpoint. And that is like what I think most teachers hear is like, oh, I'm not flexible enough to do yoga, or I don't have enough time to do yoga, or I'm Christian or Catholic or Jewish, or, you know, and I can't do yoga. It's religious. And I would have many answers and for all of those things, but mostly what I try to
have.
Yeah, exactly. Mostly I would say that there are so many different types of yoga, and this is actually like, I think, really important for wellness practitioners. I think a lot of medical doctors, you know, psychologists, social workers, they're like, oh, try yoga, it'll help you with your stress or anxiety or your flexibility, whatever. But that there's so many types of yoga out there that it's can be daunting. Like, imagine being someone who is under a lot of stress and anxiety, and or has a physical injury, or, you know, something that is ailing them, and you walk into a hardcore Ashtanga or hot yoga power, you know, sculpt class or something, and you're like, well, this is yoga, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? That might increase your anxiety. Yeah.
Right. Like, yeah.
So I would say, you know, a lot of people have tried yoga once and didn't like it, quote unquote, or they tried one teacher and didn't like it. One type of class, even of that teacher's, and didn't like it. And I've always found the best advice to people who are just getting into the practice or trying to find a space for yoga in their life is try many teachers, many voices, many studios or sacred spaces. You know, start with classes that are more restorative or yin practices, you know, things that people don't necessarily know the difference between a hatha yoga class or a hatha yoga class or a yin class. So there's lots of yogas out there for people to practice. So be creative or curious. And, you know, even online, there's so many YouTube or now virtual platforms. Some of them are going to be someone's favorite and someone's least favorite. You know, it could be the same exact class and or teacher. So, and there's different teachers where I'm like, okay, that was amazing. Like, I love that teacher. And then there's another teacher that's like your favorite. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I was really distracted by the sound of their voice or their patterning, or, you know, so to each their own. And another aspect of physical asana yoga practice that I would implore people to remember is use props, use blocks, use chairs, use blankets, use pillows. Like, do not be scared or embarrassed. I use props, like so many, in all of my practices, my meditation practice, my breathwork practice, my asana practice, my philosophy practice. Like all of these things are tools for you. They're not hindrances. They're not saying that you are not good enough or you are
Right.
not able enough. Like if anything, they mean that you have a more advanced practice because you are listening to your body. You're able to block out all of that external noise and say, no, in this moment I need 7 blocks or 2 blankets or
Right.
a bolster. And I think props can be really scary, but the floor is a prop, the wall is a prop, a pillow is a prop, a book, a water bottle, any of these things.
Yeah.
Just to not be scared to listen to what your body needs, or if you go into a class and it is too intense, just lay down, close your
Right.
eyes.
Shavasana
Like,
for an hour, do it.
yeah, I always listen to, I've not been someone that is I'm able to listen to my needs pretty much for the most part and be okay with it. So I'm always like, hey, if I need 4 blocks, I'm going to take 4 blocks.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I know at the beginning of practicing yoga, I was like, I don't need a block. I could do this, whatever. And the more I study, the more I learn, the more I practice. Like, no, those are our friends. The tools are our friends. And like, leave your ego out the door, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, you brought up so many good points. And I think too, like for people who don't feel that they are able-bodied, or maybe they're not able-bodied, maybe there's people with injuries or certain disabilities that can't get them to do what they picture of yoga. There's chair yoga, like you said, like there's actually practices of using a chair the whole time, right? And so there's all these different options out there. And I think the pandemic, when you look for some silver linings, one of the silver linings is that there is more available online and we
Yeah.
can try it all out.
And I think people get into this like completionist mentality of like, if I don't go to a physical asana yoga workout class every day, I am not doing yoga.
Yeah.
And the yoga is actually like, the ability to recognize that maybe it isn't the physical practice that you need today. Maybe it is sitting with a warm cup of tea, looking out the window and just breathing. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's taking a walk in silence. Maybe it's sleeping that extra 30 minutes. Maybe it's studying some of the texts and furthering that aspect of it. And I think in our modern, yoga industrial complex, because what sells is fitness and yoga booties and, all of these things that we've had a just a focus
Mm-hmm.
on the physical aspect of yoga, when really that's, if you prescribe to the 8 limbs of yoga, because there's many ways to look at yoga, not just 8 limbs. There, some lineages have 4 limbs and et cetera. But for example, the Yoga Sutras, one of the prescriptions within the sutras is the 8-limb path. And of the 8-limb path, or the Ashtanga yoga system of Patanjali, one aspect is asana, or the physical practice. And even back then, when this was written or contextualized, asana wasn't necessarily the vinyasa flow, breath to movement that we see today, or experience today. It was a preparation for a meditative seat. So
Right.
it was holding more ground-based seated postures in order for one to be able to sit for long periods of time in meditation. And, so I think there's so many other places to take your practice, especially starting with the ethics and the morals, the yamas and niyamas, but also contemplation, meditation, and all of those are part of a fuller yoga practice. So ignoring or focusing solely on one is like doing yourself a disservice, right?
Yes, for
Um,
sure. I
it can
think
lead to
when you hear
judgment.
people, like if you hear people say that yoga changed their life, I, I'm like almost certain that it's not the asana that changed their life. right? It's what they learned through it, through the philosophy, through the spirituality, through the breath work, through learning to be quiet and meditate and just like be. And that has, I mean, it's showing up in modern yoga, but I definitely think it's been lost. And we need more of that. That needs to be spread more. So I'm grateful for people like you who are out here in the world doing this. So thank you for sharing all of that. Just a fun little question that I've been wanting to ask on all these interviews is, do you have a morning routine? Or actually in the interview I did yesterday, I like that she called it rituals, because she's like, I'm not big into routine, but I do have rituals. So what about you? What does your morning look like if you have something like that?
I admittedly do not have a morning routine or rituals. I kind of, every day of mine is different, and there are things that I like to find in each of my days. And I make it a goal to do those things, but I'm not a very strict routine or ritual person, per se. Like, I definitely brush my teeth every morning.
That's good.
Yeah. But every day I want to move my body. Every day I want to have some space for my family and or loved ones. Every day I want to get outside, if possible, or even just look outside, because some days it's not possible.
Right.
But I, I'm just at that space in my life where I'm very much going with the flow. Different things are needed at different times, and that's working for me at this moment. I think what I don't want to see in my life is too much computer work, too much time spent on, um, the administrative or the corporate aspects of life. And I'd rather spend time cooking whole foods, being outside in nature. That's super important for me. And spending time with people I love is like what fills my cup.
Yeah.
So I don't journal. I don't you know meditate at the same time every day. Kind of fit it in.
Right.
um
Mhm.
and just, you can feel a difference when you don't. And I think that might be a little bit of post-pandemic, kind of still acclimating to what the world is in this moment, because I definitely had more of a routine or ritual things that I did previously, but that just doesn't work for me right now.
Yeah.
And as long as I get them in, I feel good.
Well, it sounds like a beautiful way to live. And I mean, I've known you for a long time, and um, I see you living a happy and fulfilled and healthy life. So not everybody needs routines. That's good. So thank you for sharing that. Is there anything that you would like to offer to our audience that they can sign up for to get more of you and your knowledge?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Right now, I'm about to go on like a or not mini, maternity leave. I am, maybe by the time this is airing, I will be having twins.
Yay.
So I'm very much pregnant right now. But I am kicking off, like, thinking about and booking 2022 trainings. So I have a few teacher trainings that I'll be teaching in next year, that are already starting to fill up my calendar. So if anyone is in the training space, and it doesn't necessarily mean just yoga teacher trainings. I've been facilitating some workshops for staff and practitioners within the wellness space. So people that are tangential to yoga and may use yoga as a reference, or have yoga classes within their organization, and want to make sure that they are honoring the practice, they are appreciating the practice versus appropriating. So I've been teaching inside the general wellness space, but also yoga teacher trainings, 200 hour and 300 hour, and other individual modules for studios and staff, kind of behind the scenes education, continued education. So if people are interested in that, they can reach me at my website, helloholanamaste.com. And I'd love to chat with them. Other than that, I'm going to be taking it easy the first part of the year.
I don't
And
know if you'd
then,
be taking it easy with
yeah,
but I
taking it
hear
easy
ya.
on the yoga front. There are, I mean, like I said, though, there's some, like, I'm a consummate learner. So I'm like, well, there's this like training and or course that I want to take at the beginning of the year. I'm like, I could probably do that, you know? So I think it's important as people, just generally, as part of this thing of yoga. The goal of yoga is to dispel that veil of ignorance that we have, whether it's an ignorance of our higher power, our higher connection, our spirit, or just ignorance of the things that we just are not knowledgeable about in the world, right, in the manifest plane. I think it's important to continue to dispel those myths and beliefs that we have that could be, holding us back. So I'm always down for further education. Like, I took a prenatal and doula training recently, and it was like really enlightening to be pregnant and taking, this training and learning how to teach others. So you're always, there's every stage of life, there's more to learn.
Yes, that's lovely. Okay. And finally, where can we find you or follow you online?
Online, I'm on Instagram at Taina Berardi, TainaBerardi, on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. I don't really use Facebook and Twitter, but that's where you can find me. But my website is tainaberardi.com or helloholanamaste.com. And yeah, I would love to connect with more people. And if you're interested in learning more about yoga from a philosophy or origins history standpoint, let's chat.
Thank you. I'll definitely be including a link to your website on the page when this goes live, so people can just kind of click through easily. Thank you so much for your time. I'm truly grateful just to know you as a person, to call you my friend, and for the fact that you took your time to be on this and answer my questions and share with all of us. Thank you so much. I love you, Taina, and bye.
Thanks, Mel. Love you too. You're doing so many amazing things. I'm super proud to be your friend.
Thank you.